They say every small town has its secrets, its whispers that ride the wind through the back roads and settle in the shadows of forgotten places. Paso Robles, nestled in California's wine country, looks like a postcard. Rolling hills, vineyards, clear blue skies. But out past the neatly trimmed rows of grapevines, tucked away in the forgotten corners of the countryside, there's a place where the landscape curdles, where the air grows heavy and the light seems to bend around something ancient and malevolent. I'm talking about the cursed oak. Growing up, the stories about that tree were just that, stories. Campfire tales whispered by older kids trying to scare us, or warnings from the old-timers who'd seen too much of the world, even if they'd never left the county line. This wasn't some grand, gnarled giant that stood out on the horizon. It was just a solitary oak, nestled in a dip in the hills, unassuming in broad daylight. From a distance, it looked like any other tree, a dark blot against the golden grasslands. But if you knew where to look, if you knew the whispers, you'd feel it. A prickle on your neck, cold spot in the summer sun, a silence that felt heavier than sound. My grandpa, a stoic rancher who didn't believe in much beyond hard work and a good handshake, had a particular aversion to that specific patch of land. He owned property not far from it, and I remember him always rerouting his fences, pushing his cattle away from that direction. When I was a kid, I asked him why he never let the cows graze near that big oak. He just squinted at the horizon, chewing on nothing. "Some places ain't meant for life, boy," he'd grumble. "Best keep clear of where the shadows stretch longest." It wasn't a superstition to him. It was a practical matter. Livestock, he'd heard, had a habit of turning up dead beneath it. No signs of struggle, no wounds, just like their life had simply been siphoned away. A few of his neighbors had lost prized heifers that way, found perfectly preserved, but utterly lifeless under its spreading canopy. They'd just shake their heads and blame a particularly bad batch of bad luck, but the unspoken truth hung in the air like the scent of impending rain. The locals called it the hanging tree, sometimes, though no official records ever corroborated a lynching there. Just rumors, circulating for generations, about a dark deed committed in desperation or hatred, staining the very ground beneath its roots. Other theories floated around too, fueled by the area's rich history. Some said it was a Native American burial ground, disturbed and angered by the encroaching ranches and farms. The Chumash people, whose ancestral land stretched across these hills, had their own legends. Tales of hungry spirits that weren't quite ghosts, but something older, primal, tied to specific natural landmarks. Entities that didn't just haunt, but consumed, drawing energy from the living world, leaving only emptiness behind. I always found that part the most unsettling. A spirit that didn't want revenge or recognition, just sustenance. I was in my late teens when I first felt the pull. Curiosity, pure and simple. Everyone said to stay away, so of course I wanted to see it up close. My friends and I would drive past on dirt roads, daring each other to stop, but no one ever quite had the guts. The tree itself stood on private land, but the hills were open, inviting. One crisp autumn afternoon, armed with a new camera and a misguided sense of invincibility, I decided to go. Alone. My plan was to hike a loop that would take me within sight of the oak, maybe snap a few atmospheric photos. Just to say I'd done it. The air started to change long before I reached the tree. The usual chatter of birds seemed to dim, the rustle of leaves hushed. It wasn't silent, not exactly, but the sounds that remained felt wrong. Distant, disjointed, like a tape recorder playing through a thin wall. A low, persistent hum, almost imperceptible, seemed to emanate from the ground itself. The grass underfoot felt strangely brittle, crunching unnaturally with each step. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination, the power of suggestion. I was looking for something spooky, so I was finding it. As the oak came into view, truly alone on the crest of a gentle rise, it struck me how utterly desolate it looked. Its branches, thick and ancient, seemed to twist less like a living thing and more like petrified arteries, reaching out in desperate, grasping gestures. Even the shadows it cast were different, darker, deeper, as if they absorbed light rather than merely deflecting it. I raised my camera, trying to compose a shot, but my hands were shaking. A sudden sharp gust of wind tore through the silence, rattling the dry leaves in the tree's crown. It wasn't cold, but it felt like something had just exhaled directly on me. That's when I heard them. The whispers. They weren't loud, not at first. More like a murmur, a soft, sibilant rustle just at the edge of hearing. It sounded like multiple voices, layered and indistinct, speaking in a language I couldn't place. It wasn't Spanish or English or anything I'd ever heard. It was guttural, yet airy, like breath being forced through dry reeds. My heart hammered against my ribs. I froze, camera halfway to my eyes, straining to hear. The whispers seemed to intensify, swirling around me, almost teasingly. Then, just as quickly, they died away, swallowed by the unnatural quiet. I backed away slowly, my spine screaming at me to run, but my feet felt rooted. I took a few more shaky photos, though I don't remember pressing the shutter. I just wanted proof. Proof I wasn't going crazy. I didn't run that day. I walked fast, back to my truck, my mind racing. The photos, when I developed them, showed nothing unusual. Just an oak tree against a hazy sky. But I couldn't shake the feeling. The whispers had been real. I hadn't imagined them. I tried to rationalize it, wind through the leaves, maybe a trick of sound. But the memory of that unknown tongue, the way it had seemed to wrap around me, clung like a shroud. A few months later, my friend Mark, a ranch hand on a neighboring property, came to me, looking pale and rattled. He'd lost a young calf, found it dead under the oak. No wounds, no signs of coyotes, just the gun. He'd known the stories, of course, but always scoffed at them. Now he was different. He described a feeling of intense cold, even though it was a warm morning, and a suffocating pressure in his chest when he approached the tree. It felt like something was watching me, dude, he mumbled, his voice tight. Like it was waiting for me to leave. He refused to go back there alone, hiring extra hands to help move the rest of his herd away from that boundary. It was the first time I saw true fear in his eyes. That calf incident wasn't isolated. Over the next year, 2 more cases popped up in the local papers, not under the oak itself, but on properties bordering the land where it stood. Unexplained livestock deaths, same strange pattern. No marks, just lifeless. It seemed the tree's influence was spreading, or perhaps its hunger was growing. I started researching. Old county records, local history archives, anything I could find on the land. It was difficult. Official documents rarely record paranormal events. But I found old newspaper clippings, small notices about unexplained disappearances in the early 1900s, vague mentions of unfortunate incidents near the old oak. Nothing concrete, but enough to paint a disturbing picture. And I found more about the Chumash legends. The hungry spirits, or Alaxul as some texts vaguely referred to them, were said to be entities that fed on the life force, on despair, on the lingering echoes of violence. They weren't tied to specific individuals, but to places where pain had been profoundly etched into the land. A lynching site, a battlefield, a place of intense suffering. The idea of something feeding on sorrow, growing stronger with each tragedy, was far more chilling than a simple, vengeful ghost. The whispers came back, not always when I was near the tree. Sometimes I'd be drifting off to sleep, and I'd hear that faint, sibilant murmur just at the edge of consciousness. It would raise the hairs on my arms, a creeping dread that would leave me staring at the ceiling until dawn. I felt a subtle drain, a tiredness that sleep couldn't fix. My dreams grew darker, filled with shadows that stretched endlessly and a cold, silent presence that watched me from the periphery. I started to wonder if the tree's influence, the Alaxul, wasn't just confined to its immediate vicinity, but could reach out, touch minds, subtly draw you in. Then came the visual. I was driving home late one night, a shortcut down a rarely used dirt road that skirted the edge of the Oaks property line. It was moonless, The stars smeared across the black canvas of the sky. As I rounded a bend, my headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the solitary oak on its rise. And there, hanging from one of its thickest branches, was a figure. It was indistinct, a deeper black against the black sky, swaying ever so slightly. Too tall, too thin, and utterly motionless. It looked like a person, perhaps, but the proportions were wrong. Elongated limbs, a head tilted at an impossible angle. It wasn't a shadow of something. It was made of shadow. My foot slammed on the brake, tires spitting gravel. My heart leaped into my throat, choking me. I stared, terrified, trying to make sense of it. Was it a prank? Some local kids hanging a dummy? But there was something about it, an unnatural stillness that screamed wrongness. A profound sense of dread washed over me, colder than any autumn night. I wanted to drive away, desperately, but I couldn't. I just sat there, my gaze locked on the shadowy form. My hands were clamped to the steering wheel, knuckles white. The whispers started again, this time louder, right outside my truck. They weren't just murmurs. They were guttural, hissing, swirling, wrapping around the cab. It sounded like a cacophony of choked voices, overlapping, some impossibly deep, others sharp and reedy. And then a single word cut through the din, clear as a bell, in English. My name. Michael. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. A statement from something that shouldn't know me. A statement from the impossible. My blood ran cold. Every rational thought vanished. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't my imagination. This was real. And it knew me. The shadowy figure began to slowly, deliberately, turn its head towards my truck. Even in the dim light, I could feel its gaze, a hollow, consuming emptiness. There were no features, just the impression of a head, neck, and shoulders. But it was looking directly at me. Panic finally seized me. I jammed the truck into reverse, tires spinning in the dirt, throwing up a plume of dust. I didn't care about the road, about hitting a ditch. I just needed to get away. The engine roared, and I peeled out, leaving a trail of dust and fear. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I couldn't. I drove until my hands stopped shaking, until the whispers faded from my ears, until the shadow of the oak was a distant, forgotten smear on the horizon. I haven't been back to Paso Robles since. I moved away, found a job far from those golden hills and their dark secrets. But the memory of that night, of the shadowy figure and the whispers that spoke my name, is etched into my mind. I see it sometimes in the periphery of my vision, a flicker of elongated shadow. And late at night, in the deepest silence, I still hear that low, guttural murmur, just at the edge of hearing. The cursed oak still stands, its branches reaching, its roots digging deep into the soil. And I know with a chilling certainty that the hungry spirits, the Alaxul, are still there, still watching, still waiting, and sometimes still whispering my name. If you've ever had an experience like this, a place that felt like it reached out to you, let me know in the comments. We're all in this strange, terrifying world together.